Half an hour, Russia and the US are set to begin the first round of talks on a new START treaty to reduce the number of strategic nuclear weapons. A US delegation's here in Moscow preparing the ground for President Obama's visit in July. Let's get the latest, catch up with this developing news story today. Maria Finoshna's down at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for us today. Morning to you, Maria. Now, as we know, there's already been a large amount of behind-the-scenes negotiating over the recent months to try and formulate something to replace START 1. What's the particular significance of today's meeting, though?
Well, Kevin, today's meeting is just crucial because after years of failed negotiations between Russia and the US, both sides are finally here in Moscow to discuss the new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. These negotiations are highly important for both sides in hitting the reset button because if successful, if Moscow and Washington will be able to agree on a new document, that could be a good sign and a serious sign of a real reloading in Russian-US relations. And as far as the negotiators from both sides themselves say, this could be a good example for other countries in terms of further nuclear non-proliferation. The negotiators are the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State Rose Gottemoeller and Russia's Anatoly Antonov, the Director of Russia's Foreign Minister's Department for Security and Disarmament. And they have, during these 3 days talks, they have to prepare a draft of a new document ahead of Barack Obama's visit to Russia in July.
What's the time frame here? Both sides seem to be in rather a hurry, don't they?
Both sides are indeed in a hurry because the goal of these negotiations is to prepare a draft of a new document, and the new treaty could be ready before the end of this year, before the previous document regulating the two countries' nuclear arsenal, which was signed back in 1991, expires this December. So only 6 months left, because that's why the two countries, both Russia and the US, have to move fast. But this, besides short deadline, the two countries have some disagreements still and misunderstanding between them. Let's now have a look at the report of my colleague Ekaterina Azarova about that.
Together.
Push the button and talk of a new start. After years of failed talks between Moscow and Washington of a new arms reduction treaty, a U.S. delegation is finally in town to talk business. The original was inked just after the end of the Cold War and places strict limits on the number of missiles and warheads in the U.S. and Russian nuclear arsenals, leading to steep reductions for both sides. But that agreement expires on December 5th of this year.
START establishes ceilings on the delivery systems that are, by today's standards, extremely high. And in addition, the verification and monitoring provisions that were established during that era, when there was far less trust and transparency than there is today.
A new treaty is necessary, one that would limit not just the quantity of nuclear warheads.
In the treaty, which is to replace the START treaty, we need to limit not only the number of nuclear warheads, but also the means of delivery.
But despite both sides' apparent willingness to lead the way in nuclear reductions, there are worries that discrepancies in the amount of nuclear warheads held by Russia and the U.S. could complicate the talks. A report recently published by the Federation of American Scientists shows the United States to have a much smaller nuclear stockpile than Russia. So the big question is, how accurate are these figures?
The START treaty doesn't really count the actual weapons that are on the systems. It assigns an artificial number to each delivery platform, and from that you get sort of what's called aggregate numbers. So the challenge for the new agreement is to try to get closer to a real number.
Numbers aside, there is another potential spanner in the works. According to Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Russia wants the new START treaty to regulate the U.S.-led anti-missile defense plans for Eastern Europe.
Shaping the new treaty, we must take into account global security. And this, of course, presumes we have to sort out things with anti-missile defense.
AMD, as it's come to be known, is something Washington is keen on, but Moscow vehemently opposes, with no compromise in sight. A lot of potential stumbling blocks are on the road to agreement, so how long will this new treaty take before materializing from discussion topic into reality? Hopes are high, not in the least, because of the head of the U.S. delegation.
There are also possibilities of just agreeing to automatically extend the treaty as is for a period of 5 years, but neither country wants to do that. They both want to make changes. They both see agreement on this replacement for START as the bridge to another, even more ambitious arms control agreement.
The first round of talks is what everyone is counting on to find out.
These discussions are not just the first steps towards a new START treaty. They can also turn out to be a litmus test, showing whether the two former foes can work together now that there's a new top man in Washington. So the new START is indeed a very symbolic place to begin. Katerina Zarba, RT, Moscow.